it's them saying to you, well, I can't imagine myself ever doing that, so I don't think it's possible. So again, don't let somebody else's beliefs about reality become yours. Have the courage to ask questions and have the courage to try and walk down that path and see for yourself.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Helpmebuy Property Podcast. Today is one of my favorite podcasts. This is about mindset and excelling into life. This is a story of a person who dropped out of uni and turned himself into an international keynote speaker and a multimillionaire. We are talking about my favorite entrepreneur, my mentor, my coach, my friend, a brother, and a communication master, a superstar, my dear teacher, Mr. Vinh Giang. Vin is an international keynote speaker. He's also an entrepreneur, a magician, communication expert. He continues the stereotype of the successful people that you don't need university degrees to find your passion. An accounting dropout, a founder of Encyclopedia of Magic, CEO of Luminary Productions, and an entrepreneur that has been able to combine the two of his biggest passions of life, teaching and magic. Stay tuned till the very end when Vin shares how he changes his life from an entrepreneur to an investor. Thank you for listening to us today. Take care. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Helpmebuy Property Podcast. Today is one of my favorite podcasts. I think this is a story of how our mindset can help you excel in life. The person that we have in our podcast is my favorite mentor, a coach, a friend, a brother, a master of communication, a superstar, my dear friend, Mr. Vin. Vin, how are you today?
Good. I love that you immediately already said this is going to be your favorite podcast. You got to lower that bar, boss. That is a lot of expectation first thing in the morning.
Look, definitely. I think from my perspective, I know a bit of your past. We have connected. We have talked so much about, who you were, who you are. And so I can see the value that the listeners would get out of this. And so,
thank you.
That story is just super, super compelling. It's amazing. And so what I want to do is I want to kick off the podcast with one of your dads saying, and let's take you back into the memory lane. And okay. I was, going through my notes, when I caught up with you, and there was something that really, really resonated with me. And so it goes like this. Son, in this life of yours, remember to do what you love. Jump as high as you can in your life. As long as I am there alive, I will always be your net.
Oh.
Amazing. This is just heart-touching, right? And so this is a good segue, talk to us about who Vin was, not who Vin is, Talk to us a bit about, you talking about breaking out of the cocoon and your old days.
Look, it depends how far you want to go back, Moss. But if I go as far as I can remember, when I was really young, as 4 or 5, I was full of life and had a lot of zest as a kid. My dad I have like the original Vinh Giang vlog from 1990. My dad had a camera with a VHS tape.
Wow.
And he filmed me when I was a kid, and I still have that video. And it's crazy because I don't remember that period of my life. I only remember it as a false memory because of that video. Because that zest that I had, that fun nature, that outgoing kid, that kid disappeared very quickly the moment school started. Because, the thing is, I grew up in Australia. I was born here. However, my first language that I learned was Djiu, which is a dialect in Chinese.
Yeah.
And then I learned Vietnamese. And then I went to school knowing zero English.
Yes, I can relate to that.
Okay, you can. So then when I went to school, I got teased and I didn't understand they were even teasing me. I didn't even know what was happening. And then as a result, I just kind of, all of that, I think that beauty that I had as a kid and all of that zest and energy just kind of evaporated.
Yeah.
So growing up, Moss, it was just, I was super anxious. I was super socially awkward. I was always pushed into that mold of basically being a loser.
Yeah.
No one wanted to hang out with me. a lot of my childhood was just spent
And school does
alone.
that to you. School definitely does that to you, right? I think it creates nerds out of you. That's what I always feel. People who are not alpha males in their life, they naturally, defer back to being a nerd or, going into their own comfort zone. So, I can totally understand and relate to some of those things.
And, I just spent a lot of my younger years just being really lost because I didn't fit into the school system. I'm very entrepreneurial at heart because my mum and dad are very entrepreneurial and my dad and his brothers are. And what that meant for me, Moss, was that all of my friends who were academic, they had the school system and teachers to guide them on how to navigate that path. But because I didn't fit into that system, I literally didn't have anyone guide me. The teachers would just make me feel like I'm really stupid. And my friends would make me feel like I'm really stupid. And all through primary school and high school, I just felt stupid. I just felt like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm just not capable. I guess I'm doomed. And really, it was just because everyone else had guidance. I didn't.
Yeah. And I mean, you have lived your stereotype, isn't it? Like if you think about a lot of successful people in life and they talk about, we don't want to, give into the school system, right? And school teaches you nothing. You talk about Bill Gates, you talk about Gary Vee, everyone talks about, drop out of uni, drop out of school. And so you have lived that life, right? And so talk to a bit about that as to how did that transition happen from, you studying accounting to dropping out, being a magic master to international keynote speaker. Like what is that transition? And I know you shared the story when we first met about you being an entrepreneur at school. You were doing a lot of eBay stuff. So, how does that story transitions into, all of these things that you've achieved in life?
Well, I guess connecting from what we just said, right? I didn't have any guidance from the school. So I gradually realized that I needed to find guidance outside of school. And I used to look at mum and dad as just mum and dad. I didn't really think they could be my teachers. They could be my mentors. But I quickly realized that, oh, wow, actually, I can't learn very much at school, but I can learn a lot from what my mum and dad are doing. So I watched my mum and dad, my dad and his brothers, they started South Australia's first Asian grocery, one of the first Asian groceries.
Wow.
So I watched them buy low and then sell high. And I went, oh, that's really cool. I like buying stuff for cheap and then selling for higher. So then I started my own journey. I jumped onto eBay and I would buy things for really cheap. I bought MP3 players at the time. I know you know this story.
Yes.
I would buy these MP3 players and then I would sell them to my friends for double the price.
Yeah.
And then after that, I realized that, hang on, these people on eBay, they're kind of upselling me because they're the middlemen. So why don't I go straight to the source? So then I went straight to the source and I discovered that these people on eBay were buying from a place in China called the Canton Fair. So the Canton Fair is a massive fair that happens every year where you can buy electronics and you can buy them in bulk. So I flew to China when I was 19 years old and I would buy these things at wholesale and then I'd sell them. I realized that I couldn't rely on the school system to guide me and to inspire me. So I looked for inspiration outside of school.
Yeah.
And I found that in my parents.
Why accounting?
Accounting? Well, that was because of family pressures. That was because of cultural pressures.
Sure.
I remember this. I wrote down when we go to university after we finish year 12, I wrote down teacher first, and then I wrote down accountant, then lawyer, then pharmacist.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be a teacher. That's what I really wanted to be.
Yeah.
Because my dad in Vietnam was a teacher. And then what I realized was, everyone in society, everyone in my culture, if I wrote down accountant, lawyer, and pharmacist, they would respect that more and they would praise me more if I wrote that. So I scrubbed out teacher and I put down accounting because I wanted the approval from others more than I wanted to live my own life, right? So I didn't have the courage to live my own life. I wanted to please others.
And it's so true. Like I can resonate with a lot of these stuff. When I was at uni, I still remember, one of my mentors at uni, I told them that I want to do a PhD and become a teacher. And they're like, no, you want to be an entrepreneur. Like, why do you want to be a teacher? I was so focused on becoming a teacher at that time that I was ready to do my PhD. And they're like, no, you'll be wasting your time. And so I think I'm the only accountant pretty much in the whole accounting industry that hates accounting with passion. And so I think the property or the investment gets me to be a mentor and the coach on the property side of stuff. And so I still get my teaching out, that passion out. And so I can totally understand as to where, you're sitting. But like, okay, so you go into accounting to get the validation, but then you drop off and, go into becoming a magician. Like, a complete U-turn.
Yep. Well, I think at the time when I was 18, I didn't have the courage. I didn't have a strong identity at that point, and I was more focused on pleasing others. And that's why I picked accounting, because I wanted to please mum and dad. I wanted to please my ex-girlfriend at the time, her parents. I wanted to make my friends think I was cool because I was in commerce and law.
Yeah.
And during university, I was suffering a lot because, you know that feeling when you're not meant to be there, but you're there. And you rock up every day and you're like, I know I'm in the wrong place. I know I'm doing the wrong thing. I just know it. So after 4.5 years, and the degree was 5 years, after 4.5 years of almost completing it, to me, that was 4.5 years of me building up the courage to be my own person, to walk my own path. And it took 4.5 years of walking somebody else's path for me to build that courage to then go, you know what, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
Because I knew, Moss, that if I completed that degree, that I was going to use it as a safety net.
Yeah.
And if I completed that degree, I know the temptation of a good life would be so strong that I would no longer dare to walk the path less walked.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's amazing because I always say this, that fear is the biggest motivator in your life, right? The more you succumb into fear and, almost like, look eye to eye and basically go in, is what basically motivates you. I think, you have one of your sayings where you say your adversity is the best competitive advantage in your life, right? So I think that's what it speaks to you. It's basically that you're referring to. And so what was the trigger point? What made you go to your parents and say, nah, I'm not going to do this anymore?
I remember it was a story in a book that I read, and I think it was 48 Laws of Power, where it says there was a chapter and it told a story about ancient warriors who they would arrive to the shore with their ships, and what they would do is they'd burn their ships, and they'd basically show the enemy that we're not going home, we're conquering, or we're going to die here. And I remember reading that and it was super inspiring. I went, wow, that's so cool. And I knew myself that if I arrived on that island and I kept my ship, I know I'd probably very quickly get back on that ship and go home because of how much fear controls me. Like you said, Moss, a lot of the times we just succumb to the fear, right? So I would have got back on that boat and finished the degree and then had a really cushy and comfy career in accounting. So I knew I needed to in a sense burn the ship. And again, I'm not saying that that's advice for everybody. It was just the right decision for me because I know what I do. I always move towards what's comfortable. So I burned the ships. I said to my mom and dad, I said, look, I'm going to quit. And I have to, because the last 4.5 years have been the most miserable 4.5 years of my life.
Wow.
And it's either going to be just 4.5 years of misery, or it could be my whole life.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my parents. I said to them, look, you didn't risk your life. You didn't travel across the ocean on a boat for me to be miserable, did you? And when I do the story in the keynote, it seemed like it happened in one conversation, Moss, but it was 8 months of communicating back and forth and crying and why didn't you understand? And, it took 8 months for them to truly understand and support me.
Sure.
To become a magician.
It was a blank no from their perspective. It's like, and so you're going to be a magician. That's a hobby. What are you going to do with your career? What are you going to do with your life?
That's right. They freaked out. Because, and it wasn't their fault. It wasn't that they didn't want to support me. It was because you've got to understand to a Vietnamese parent who's in their 50s and 60s, what I just told them is outrageous.
Yeah.
And to them, they reacted from a place of fear. It freaked them out.
Definitely.
Because to them, accounting is secure. Magician, you're basically a clown. Like that's what they think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I'll resonate some of the things that I remember my dad used to say to me when I first moved into the property space. He always thinks that property is temporary money. So he's like, oh, but you can't live your life on running a business or getting commissions. You need to get a
Really?
paycheck every month. How are you not going to get the paycheck and live? Like, he could not comprehend that, because my parents are not entrepreneur. Like, they've lived their life as a service class. So from his
Yeah.
perspective, that ambiguity, that vagueness was a killer. From his perspective, well, there's no guarantee that income would be there tomorrow. What if there is nothing? What if the whole world stops selling and buying property, for example?
You know what I've realized as well, Moss, is that it doesn't matter what you do.
Yes.
There are no guarantees anyway.
100%. Definitely.
No, and it's such a fallacy. It's such a false belief.
Yeah.
I've seen friends who are pharmacists lose their jobs during the COVID period, where everyone was thinking pharmacy is the safest thing to get into, and people, it's just I've seen people in many lines of professions lose their jobs. It's not real. That 100% guarantee doesn't exist.
So magician would have been wonderful. It was great, I presume. And then keynote speaking, like, how did that transition happen?
Well, I fell out of love with magic. And it's interesting because when you ask me these questions, it really made me reflect on, I allow myself to transform and evolve and close a chapter of my life and start a new chapter. I really do. So to me, with magic, Moss, I fell out of love with it. I did it for about 10 years and I kind of went, you know what? I'm ready to close this chapter and start a new chapter.
Amazing.
And what I've learned is that I don't really fall for the sunk cost fallacy. And I think a lot of the times the sunk cost fallacy is just, again, I've already invested 10 years of my life into this. I should invest the rest of my life into this.
Yeah.
And there's a quote that I wrote down on my journal, and I've got it here, and I want to read it to you. And it's from Confucius, and Confucius says, "Every man has two lives, and the second starts when he realizes he has just one."
Wow.
I never really understood that quote. For the longest time in my life, I went, what the hell does that even mean? But I finally understand it, and I've understood it in my life in that, again, every man has two lives, and the second starts when he has just one, meaning that we really only have one life. And when we realize we have one life, we give ourselves permission to write new chapters, to live different lives. Because when you truly understand that and as far as I'm concerned, and as far as my intelligence allows me, we only get to ride this ride once. And if you only get to ride this ride once, don't fall into that trap of thinking, well, I've already done this for 20 years. I should spend the rest of my life doing the same thing.
Definitely.
Let that second life start, third life start. And I think I want to experience as much as I can in this life and allow myself to write as many different chapters as I can.
Yes.
And that's kind of why I went, hey, this keynote speaking thing looks super fun. I can combine magic with teaching, and I could perform on stage and be all over the world. And I was like, yeah, I would love to write a chapter on this.
100%. And I presume that, it wasn't always green. I always say this, that, I'll build the castles with the stones people throw at me. So,
Oh, wow, that's morbid.
So, what stones were there in your life? The biggest failures, the lessons, the unsuccessful ventures, talk to us a bit about, the adversity.
Look, I think, and when you ask me this question, it's easy to go to the monetary failures. There's been a lot of financial failures in my life. And I thought, you know what, we'll go a different path, because I tend to go down this path quite often. I think one of the biggest failures, when I look at it from a almost philosophical and life point of view, is I allowed for a big part of my life, I allowed other people's beliefs about what's possible for me dictate my life. And then only as I grow a little older and hopefully a little less wrong as I get older, I realized that for a big chunk of my 20s, I remember people in my community, again, ex-partners and their parents, and no fault of their own. Again, just it came from a place of fear. I understand. I have empathy for that. They would say to me, well, you can't build an online business. You can't be a magician. You can't be, what the hell is a keynote speaker? You can't do that. I think that career path doesn't exist. And as a result of them saying these things, these were beliefs that they had.
Yeah.
I looked at it as reality. So, okay, I guess it's okay. Yep, you're right. I guess it's not possible. And then I didn't even try.
Wow.
I didn't even try. And they stopped me from even trying. And I didn't dare to ask the question. And this is true in the Asian culture. We get taught from a very young age not to question our elders, not to question authority. So when someone someone from a position of authority says, "No, you can't do that. Don't go there," you just go, "Yep, okay, I won't."
Yeah.
Whereas the lesson there was, and it's not to be disrespectful, but it's to be curious and ask questions. So when I started to ask questions, I saw through the illusion. And I remember one of my ex-partners, her dad was saying, "You can't become a magician. It's not possible. You can't make good money on that." And I just asked him, how do you know you can't? And then the whole house of cards fell.
Yeah.
And he was just like, well, you just can't. I'm like, yeah, but genuinely, how do you know you can't? How do you know? And I just watched him struggle to be able. He never tried. I go, "Have you ever tried?
Yeah.
Do you know any successful magicians?" The answer, just the whole house of cards fell.
Definitely. Yes.
So to me, the takeaway is when someone says to you something can't be done, that's their own beliefs about them thinking that they can't do that very thing you want to do.
Yeah.
It's them saying to you, "Well, I can't imagine myself ever doing that, so I don't think it's possible." So again, don't let somebody else's beliefs about reality become yours. Have the courage to ask questions and have the courage to try and walk down that path and see for yourself.
Yeah. And talk to us a bit about, your journey in relation to the keynote speaking. I know, you tried and tried. You've shared one story where, you flew from Australia, I think all the way to New York, I think from memory. How did that, the persistence that brings and, comes out as a person who was trying to prove other wrong and going down this path of, I know this is right. And, I'm going to prove to the world that, this is the right path for me.
It was actually Los Angeles, right?
Los Angeles, yes.
Again, the more ridiculous the dream, the more persistent and resilient you're going to have to be on the journey.
Definitely.
And a career in keynote speaking to me is one of the most outrageous dreams ever. And I love these kind of dreams, and I give myself permission to dream.
Yeah.
So I remember to build my career in the US, at the start of my career, I used to tell my clients in the US, and I didn't even have clients. I just had people who are kind of interested in me. I used to tell them, "Oh yeah, I live in Southern California. So if you want to book me, just let me know. It's okay. I live in Southern California." And then I had a client ask me, they go, "Hey Vin, we've got like a $5,000 budget. Yeah, you said you lived in Southern California. Can you speak at an event? Last minute, a speaker dropped out. Can you speak this Friday?" And it was a Monday, and I was in Adelaide. So I said to them, "Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, of course. Yeah, just the drive. No worries. I'll see you Friday." So I just literally booked a ticket, flew all the way over there, and did the talk. And it was hard because at the time, a lot of the companies in America they didn't want to book speakers outside of the US because they didn't want to pay all this travel, etc.
Of course.
So I just remember flying back and forth to America on economy and doing so 10 times a year. It was brutal building that career. And sometimes clients didn't even pay because I said I'd do it for free. And that was me getting the reps in and building a presence in the US. And
definitely.
Yeah, it was rough as guts.
And how was the journey from Adelaide to US and back to Adelaide, and what brought you back?
Well, after doing all of that in 2016, I'm very grateful and thankful that I was able to build a really flourishing career in the US. So I moved to the US in 2017 and stayed in the US for 4 years. And we somehow managed to build this incredibly fulfilling career as a speaker. And in the end, Moss, I decided to come home because it was a quote my dad said to me too. And my dad's someone who's very inspiring to me. And he recognized that while I was building my career in the US and while I was achieving a lot of progress and success, I'd become really unhappy. And he said to me, he said this wonderful little line where he said, "A king that knows the limits to his desires will rule a lifetime." And I'd become so greedy. I'd become so greedy. I'd become so hungry for more. I'd become infatuated with more, that I'd lost track of what enough was.
Yeah.
And no matter what level of my career I started hitting, Moss, I just wanted more. I wanted more. I wanted more. And I ended up being away from my family for 200 days a year.
Wow.
And I was doing 90 to 100 events a year and become depressed. And that quote that my dad shared with me, I'd become that king that you'd see sometimes in a war movie, where they become so drunk on conquering that they expand too quickly, and in the end, their dynasty gets crushed and destroyed.
And it's okay to be greedy and selfish at the start, right? Because that's the fuel, that's the driver. Because if you don't have that,
of course,
then it's not going to take you where you want to get to. But knowing the limits, where to stop and where to find that balance, and bringing yourself back, I think that's the key thing. Finding your balance in life as to, okay, what's important, what's not important anymore, is quite the key. And I think people drive in that direction without knowing, without thinking. Ultimately, what they say is, there are things in life that you achieve, but it's always achieved at a peril of losing something on the way. Along the way, you have to drop. You look at the rocket going up, and as it goes up, it drops off everything. So yeah,
it's a good metaphor.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of how far do you want to go, right?
Well, thank you for calling that out, because you're right. You're right in that there are chapters of your life where you do need to be selfish. And it's okay to be selfish, and it's okay to want more. And thank you for calling that out, because that's one of the major differences between the mindset in the US and Australia. When growing up in Australia, I always felt bad wanting more. I always felt bad that I want to be more successful, that I want to make lots of money, that I want to have these things and this material thing and that material thing. I always felt bad. Whereas when I went to the US, they encouraged it, and they said, no, it's fine. You can have lots of impact in the world and make lots of money at the same time. And I kind of went, oh, wow, I never knew that was okay. I thought that if you make lots of money, you're a bad person.
Yes.
So thank you for calling that out, because for a period of my life, it was okay. It was okay for me to do that. It was okay for me to want those things. And it was just that I did that for 4 years and I didn't recalibrate. I didn't take the time to go, okay, is this still what I wanted? Should I just stay on this train?
Yeah.
And it was actually time for me to move on to the next journey in life. And again, the next chapter, right? And that's why I came home. I came home because I went, you know what? I think I know what enough is now. I think I know, and I think it's time to shift a little bit and write the next chapter. So I came home. And that's why everyone is so like, what the hell? Why did you come back home to Adelaide of all places?
Yes, what happened?
It's, my son, his name is Xander. And at the time we moved back because he was about to start school.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I've had my fun chapter. I've had my incredible kind of epic chapter that I got to play. This next chapter is about focusing on the family, focusing on my wife now and my son. And for my wife, coming back to Adelaide she was going to be around her friends and her family, and for me to be around my friends, my family. I'm like, okay, that was a fun rock star kind of chapter. Let's go into the dad life chapter. I'll get a van and I'll be cool in a van.
And look, ultimately, you say this, and I'm going to quote you here. You're a direct reflection of the 5 people you spend time with. And so if you think about yourself, who are you the direct reflection of, or who are the 3 most influential people in your life? I would presume, of course, your parents or your dad had a big, influence on your life. Who else? Who does Vin looks up to?
Of course. So you've already mentioned it. So mum, dad, my uncles, etc. And just to quickly call out too, the direct reflection quote is not, I didn't originate that. Obviously, there's many others that have said that before. I just borrow. We're standing on the shoulders of giants here.
Yes.
I don't say this enough. And the person that definitely I look up to and I go to for advice and guidance all the time is actually my wife. And I go to her for a lot of guidance because my life is very chaotic. I'm someone who's driven by passion. I'm driven by adventure, and I love doing things. And she's that constant in my life, that she's my anchor.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times I go to her and I'm like, hey, I'm doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You know me best. And she truly does. She knows me very well. And I go, well, what? Because through all the excitement and the emotion, I'm like, which one would Vin actually want to do here? And she goes, 100% this, 100%. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right, yeah. And it's just, so she is someone that anchors
She's the calm within the chaos.
She's absolutely, she's the, she, and I think I give her credit for this. I said that when you've come into my life, that's when I became exponentially successful, because you were able to bottle the lightning. Right. Yes. Whereas before I was just chaos. I was just all chaos and all over the place. Whereas what you've been able to do is you've been able to help me channel that chaos and create focus.
Definitely.
She does that for me. So credit due. And it's funny because on a recent podcast, I realized that people go, hey, so Vin, how were you able to do all of this? Who was supporting you financially? My wife. My wife paid off my credit cards more times than I can tell you. And she was literally my sugar mama. And what she said, and I love this, and I want to say this more these days. And she goes, you know, like people getting into Bitcoin early, I just got into Vcoin really early, right? So she invested in Vcoin, and I'm telling you right now, she is benefiting from the return on that investment right now.
That's it.
Vcoin,
And this is amazing. I think the impacts that people around you make in your life, people don't tend to, talk and reflect on some of these things. Naturally, what I say is your foundational success is your doing, but your exponential success is the people who you bound with and, basically, hang around with. And so, the missus, the wife, the business part, the life partner plays a big role in where you come through, in any part of your, whatever you're doing. So, yeah.
It's one of the most important choices we make in life is who we marry. And I don't think we give enough sometimes credit or time and attention to that. And I'll answer very quickly as well. I believe in having two groups of mentors. One, I call this group the mentors that are 100 steps in front of you, 1,000 steps in front of you. I have mentors like that for inspiration, and that's Elon Musk. That's people who people kind of say, oh, who's inspired you? Oh, Elon Musk. And you say these, Oprah Winfrey, or these key people. However, I also have a second bucket of people who inspire me. And these are people who are 1 to 2 steps in front of me.
Yeah.
And I tend to keep a lot of people who are 1 to 2 steps in front of me in my top 5. So for example, there's a thought leader, her name's Sade, and you can find her on Instagram. She's very, very popular online. And she has an incredible following. She's built an incredible business online. And I love what she's done. So depending on what chapter of life I'm in currently, I will look for mentors who are 1 to 2 steps ahead of me, and I bring them into my top 5. So I've got a little mastermind with Sade that we jump on once a month. And not only Sade, but another thought leader in Asia named Simone Heng. And we all come together and we share ideas on what's currently working, and we cross-pollinate our online audiences, and we look for joint ventures to do.
Amazing.
And the reason I separate the two groups of mentors is because I can't buy Twitter. I can't create, I can't get us to Mars, right? So if I try to look for pragmatic advice from Elon Musk, I'm not going to be able to do anything with that information. Whereas Sade sharing with me, her creating this new offering that's going to be something that helps her build a mailing list, that's something I can apply next week on Tuesday.
Yes.
So have mentors that inspire you for the fuel source to feel inspired and for motivation, but then have mentors that you bring into your top 5 who are going to be able to share pragmatic advice that you can apply next week at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday.
Definitely. So it's more tangible than...
More tangible, yeah.
Yes.
And don't find people who are too far ahead of you, because sometimes it does the opposite. Sometimes it actually demoralizes you and you go, oh, I'm never going to be able to help human beings become a multi-planetary species.
Yeah.
So again, really specifically, Moss, I find people for my top 5. It changes depending on the chapter of life that I'm living.
Definitely.
So right now I'm purely focused on building a large online presence, building purely an online business. So all the people in my top 5 now, outside of my wife and my parents, are people in the online space who build online businesses and build online revenue streams.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And segue to this.
Okay.
Who does Vin wants to be as a person or remembered?
Yes.
Is it the magic? Is it the showmanship? Is it a teacher, or is it something completely different? Who does Vin wants to be remembered as?
Just before we dive into that one, I just want to say that I also, moving forward, want to get more into property. So I want you in my top 5. So just saying, just putting it out there, brother. Just putting it out there into the ether.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, what I want to be remembered for, I think it's simple. I want to be remembered as the teacher that helped his students be able to share their gifts and talents with the world. That's it. I mean, I teach communication skills, and that's the chapter I'm in right now. And what I want to be remembered for is just that. I want to be remembered as the person that helped you be able to share your gifts and talents with the world.
Definitely.
Because so many people have so many wonderful gifts and talents trapped within them. And because of their inability to communicate their value to the world, all of that value, all of the gifts, all of the talents, it goes unnoticed.
Definitely. And does the transitional stories of people, changing their life because of using their instrument better, I'm talking your tone, does that
thank you.
inspire you coming back?
Well, it has. And Moss, one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you is because you came to my class. You flew all the way from Melbourne to Adelaide to join me for a couple of days at my workshop. And that's what I want to be doing with my life, Moss. Look, like I said, I loved being on stage. I loved being in front of thousands of people and getting all the applause. I loved that period of my life. That was fun. Yeah. That was super fun. But now I more than anything enjoy being in an intimate theater with a class of 50 to 60 students and then deep diving into building this skill set.
Yeah.
I love that more than anything because that fulfills me now.
Definitely.
Whereas for a period of my life, that applause fulfilled me, but now it's more that meaning, that connection, that deep connection you and I built while we were together at the workshop.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
And as a quick shout out, look, for people who are listening this show, it's an amazing, amazing course. Vin, do you want to spend maybe 2 minutes, talking about that course? Look, I got so much out of that. I think my mind shifted. I think I got my voice back. I'm doing 2 keynotes. I'm coming on a property show on TV in say 4 weeks time. And so, yeah, it was a life changer. Let's put it that way. So please,
thank you. Well, look, I mean, if you're in a position in life where you really feel like you're not able to create deeper connections with others, you feel like you're not able to communicate the value that you have inside, you know, we all have someone, right? I was talking to one of my good friends and he's like, man, I hate Brad. I'm like, what the hell? Who's Brad? He goes, he's at my workplace and he always gets the bloody promotion. I always miss out and Brad always gets the promotion. Brad always gets the girls. Brad, and he says to me, and Brad's bloody stupid. Brad's not even that smart. I'm smarter than Brad. I can do better work than Brad. And I'm like, we all have a Brad in our lives, don't we?
Yes.
But if you feel like you're in that position where you're not able to speak up, you're not able to communicate your value, etc. And that's what I teach people how to do. I teach people how to build deeper connections with others. I teach people how to use their voice, use their body language, storytell, actively listen. And I really give people an opportunity to break out of their comfort zones. And what I call it in the course, and this, is how do you break out of your mold?
Yes.
Because we all have a mold that, whether you've created the mold for yourself or your surroundings and society has put you into this box and said, Vin's this is who Vin is, and that's who he'll always be.
Yeah.
And I try to create a workshop environment where I push you to break out of that box, to break out of that mold.
Yeah.
And the quote I often say is, don't be so attached to who you are in the present that you don't give the future version of yourself a chance. So when you come to this 2-day experience, it's more than just communication skills. It's you discovering who you can become.
Yes. And I couldn't agree more. Look, I think one of my earlier frustrations in life was not that I am not succeeding. It's seeing people who are succeeding, who I know are not better than me, right? And so I think that's where the biggest frustration is, right? I talk to a lot of clients and they're like, I earn a bit more than this person. I'm much smarter than this person, but I'm so much further away from this person. And so
it's Brad.
Ultimately,
it's Brad. Damn you, Brad. No, but it's true. It's true. That frustration was true for me too. I remember one of my mentors telling me, and he said, Vin, there's someone who is less credible than you, less capable than you, making more money than you, doing exactly what you want to do. And there's so many of them.
Yes.
And they're all named Brad, right? So I think the important thing here to realize is that don't just blame Brad and hate on Brad, because the moment you blame Brad and you hate on Brad, you're just giving away all of your power. Take responsibility for your own life. Take responsibility for your own success.
Definitely.
And work on your ability. Either work on your technical skills or work on your communication skills. And I always say this to everyone, that all of my students, that if you become undeniable with your technical skill, and then if you become undeniable with your communication skills, what that means is you're then able to negotiate whatever reality you want to live. I mean, like right now, this week, Moss, I'm getting up at 12 a.m. teaching one of my clients in the US, that's a Fortune 500 company, from my garage in my house, from Adelaide in the northern suburbs, which others would consider as the ghetto, right? And I'm teaching a Fortune 500 company communication skills. If that's not reality is negotiable, I don't know what is.
100%.
And I'm only able to do that because, again, I just commit to becoming undeniable with my technical skill and then undeniable with my communication skills.
Definitely. And
take responsibility, right?
And that's where the rapport building, and bringing all of this together, it's amazing, how people perceive you. You could be 100% on the technical skills, but if you can't project yourself as that, then you would always be, in my corporate days, I still remember, my boss used to say, where is your executive presence, and I used to always think that, what is this bloody executive presence that people talk about? And then, you slowly and gradually realize that it's how you are perceived. And so, your body language, your voice, your tone,
that's
all of that basically comes into that executive presence. And so, 100%. The final question of the podcast, and this is more in relation to you being an entrepreneur and you basically scaling back your life now. And so how have you become a better person in transferring your cash flow from the entrepreneurship into, say, the retirement or the generational wealth that you want to pass to your kids, to your generations coming through, or even the community, right? What is happening in that space? I'm always keen and eager to understand as to how people are using that power of business to make a better person or better life out of other people or for themselves for the future generations.
Well, I don't know if I'm doing it well or not. I genuinely don't know. I'm good at teaching communication skills. I wouldn't say that I'm very good at investing. But what I can give you a sense of what I do is, I reinvest a lot of money into my business because that's what creates the highest ROI for me.
Yes. And
I've recently become very interested in reinvesting a lot into creating multiple online streams of income. So my online course is easily what generates me the most revenue in all of my businesses combined now, which is amazing. Kind of crazy.
And how long did it take?
So
when?
I've wanted an online business since 2011. We're now 2023. So I would say, all of that time.
Amazing.
Yeah. So then I've realized that. So I'm reinvesting a lot into the infrastructure. I'm building more online courses. I'm looking at, licensing paths of revenue now and all these different types. So I reinvest a lot into the business. And when I don't reinvest into business, I put most of my money into ETFs and property.
Wow. Amazing.
So ETFs, property, and a little bit of cryptocurrency. And I don't know how to feel about that right now. And I want to put more of it into property. And that's why I really want to open the conversation with you moving forward and put another call in your diary.
Yes. I think it's interesting as entrepreneurs and as a business owner myself, right? I think, you would always get your best ROI with your business, especially if you're doing your business well, right? And so, I've shifted my mentality in thinking that, online business is almost like a passive income now as well to a certain extent, because, if you're not doing, live courses, if there's a lot of recording and, self-learning in that space, naturally that business is going to be the bread and butter, and it's going to take over the whole bit, because the world there's 6 billion people out there, or 7 billion people out there. That is basically your market, right? And even if you cut out that niche by, 0.5%, that's the biggest pie, that you would always aim for. So, yeah.
It was a piece of wisdom from Naval, the book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And he had this one passage where he wrote, "The new employees of the future are computer servers sitting in a factory that are willing to work for you 24/7 at maximum efficiency
100%.
and productivity." And I remember when I read that, there was just this like mind explosion moment that happened. I went, wow, so the new workforce of the future is a computer that's sitting in a factory, and there's millions of them there, and they could be working for me 24/7.
Yeah.
And then that's when my brain kind of lit on fire, and I went, okay, I need to take everything that I do, productize it, and put it online.
Definitely.
And and again, Moss, just to give complete transparency, I've recreated my online course 4 times from scratch.
Wow.
Right? And the 4th time from scratch, only then did it start to take off and take fire. And now it's to the point where this morning I just woke up and I got this really beautiful email from someone from South Africa who just binged my online course and loved it and wrote me this beautiful email.
It's an amazing course.
We live in a world now where you can have global impact, again, from Adelaide.
It is an amazing course, and it shows a lot of passion. It shows a lot of hard work. It shows the truest nature of you providing a lot of value to people. And so it's not just online course where, people are just, absorbing. I think it's very engaging. That's how I felt. It's one of those which keeps your attention in check all the time. It's not one of those where, you put it on and then you go get a coffee and, take a toilet break and then come back and the course is still going. It's not one of those. So, I can definitely be an advocate to that. I can relate to some of that journey as well. I think we have just started Australian Property Academy, and I'm going through that journey. And so I can totally understand and relate as to, how much of that would be what people would resonate. And, it's just a different world out there. So, yeah.
Have you created it yet?
No, going through. And so I have a course designer. So I have all the content. I have a book coming out in 3 months. So fingers crossed. And so I think that's the essence of everything that I know, or that's the essence. The first volume is the essence of everything that I know. And then there is a second volume coming through. And so a lot of the course is basically going into a lot more detail than, the book just skims through. So and so I have a course designer that I'm working with, because I'm terrible at, conveying the message as to how people would resonate and connect with. And so it does not come naturally to me, Vin, just like it comes to you now. But it's
congratulations.
Yes, it's an interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Any parting words for today, Vin?
Yes, I'll leave you all with a quote that I love, and I've recently fallen in love again with this quote, and it's a quote from Coach John Wooden. He's a basketball coach who's unfortunately passed away, but he's amazing. And he has this quote where he says, "If you focus on the things you can't control, you'll soon lose control of the things you can control."
Amazing.
So my friends, I know a lot of people in the world right now do feel overwhelmed and have a lot of anxiety and whatnot. And I think just come back to that quote when you feel anxious, and just remember, what can you control? Just focus on that and let go of everything you can't control.
Definitely.
You can control improving yourself technically. You can control improving your communication skills. Just focus on those 2 areas and leave the rest.
Beautiful, beautiful segue. Look, thank you for finding time, Vin, today. This was an amazing chat. I'm sure we will have more of it. Any questions, comments, or, people who wants to reach out to Vin, I think it's at AskVin, which is your call out at Instagram. Thank you. Have a great day. Keep smiling. Keep investing. This is Moss and Vin checking out. Adios.